Good morning. It's Thursday, the 21st of October. Our main story this morning. Pressure is growing on the government to reimpose some COVID restrictions in England amid a surge in cases. It comes as the British Medical Association has accused ministers of being willfully negligent.
It says that measures such as compulsory face coverings and social distancing should be brought back in to protect the NHS as we head into the winter months. Here's more from our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake.
The NHS under pressure. Staff and resources always strained as winter approaches, but as COVID admissions rise, doctors warn it could become unbearable.
The government should be making sure that the public are expected and required to follow simple infection control measures, such as the wearing of masks in indoor public settings, including public transport. Now is the time to act. We have enough evidence that this is a trajectory heading in the wrong direction.
Yesterday, the Health Secretary acknowledged things would get worse. 100,000 cases per day, he warned. And unless people took precautions, ministers would have to act.
Am I saying that if we don't do our bit, get vaccinated, all those behavioural changes that we can make, that we are more likely to face restrictions as we head into winter? Then I am saying that. I think we've been really clear that we've all got a role to play.
But for now, the government's holding firm and says it's not yet time to take further measures. Moving to the government's Plan B in England would make face coverings mandatory in some settings. People would be asked to work from home and vaccine passports introduced. In Northern Ireland, face coverings remain a legal requirement in crowded indoor spaces. It's the same for masks in Wales, where proof of vaccination is needed in nightclubs and people are asked to work from home. Scotland's strategy similarly includes vaccine passports, and face masks are required in schools and some other settings. For now, the focus at Westminster is urging those not yet vaccinated to come forward and getting booster jabs to those who are eligible. But doctors say it's willfully negligent of ministers not to take further steps, and pressure on the health service is likely only to increase in the coming weeks. Jonathan Blake, BBC News.
Well, let's speak now to our political correspondent, Chris Mason. Very good morning to you, Chris. So we heard from the Health Secretary very clearly outlining how he sees the scale of the problem where we are now. And then on the other hand, we have those health leaders, NHS leaders saying, now's the time. Where have we got to in this debate today?
Keep jabbing and carry on cautiously, Charlie, seemed to be the government's message yesterday, and is certainly the government's message again this morning, despite the fact that England is something of an outlier as far as the restrictions are concerned, as Jonathan was spelling out there. And now there's this clamour from plenty of people in the medical world saying, look, something has to happen and has to happen quickly, otherwise you encounter a worse problem further down the track. So Patrick Vallance, the government's chief scientific advisor, has said publicly that he's forever saying to the Prime Minister, you've got to go quicker than you think you have at any stage, or the situation gets worse. Now, the government, as far as England is concerned, is clearly reluctant to start slamming down further restrictions, even though those restrictions around Plan B are at the relatively light end of the spectrum compared with where we were during those full lockdowns. What's striking, though, Charlie, is I've been looking this morning at the government's COVID winter plan, which was published 5 weeks ago when we last had a Downing Street COVID press conference. And in that, under Plan B, yes, it talks in points B and C of Plan B about face masks and about working from home if you can. But the first point is the government making the case that we as individuals should act cautiously. In other words, it seems to me an element of Plan B was implemented yesterday, with Sajid Javid saying to us as individuals in England, I ask you to behave responsibly voluntarily, and if you don't, we'll have to impose some rules.
Chris, thank you very much for that. And just let you know, we will be speaking to the Health Minister, Edward Arger, at 7:30 this morning. As always, if you have thoughts about what you heard yesterday, about the precautions you're taking or not taking, do let us know during the course of the morning. 7:30, that interview.
Time now is 6 minutes past 6. On yesterday's programme, we reported about a spate of number of women being injected with drugs on nights out.
Now the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has asked police for an update on spiking, and nighttime industry leaders have called for an inquiry. More than 150,000 people have signed a petition calling on the government to make searches at bars and clubs mandatory.
Operators across the country have been working with police, local authorities, key stakeholders. Their focus has been on safeguarding customers, particularly women at night, and they without a doubt have been escalating their frontline protocols in terms of searching.
The boss of one of the UK's biggest energy companies has called for the price cap, which sets a minimum price which households pay, to be abolished. Keith Anderson, who is the chief executive of Scottish Power, said the recent energy crisis had exposed deep flaws in the way the market was structured and serious failures on the part of the regulator Ofgem. Now, Ofgem said the price cap had helped protect millions of customers from sudden increases in global gas prices.
A huge leak of documents seen by BBC News shows how countries are trying to change a crucial scientific report on how to tackle climate change. The leak reveals Saudi Arabia, Japan and Australia are among countries asking the UN to play down the need to move rapidly away from fossil fuels, raising questions for the COP26 climate summit in November.
Nearly 1,500 people have been arrested in England and Wales in a week-long operation against so-called county lines drug networks. They involve dealers, usually in big urban centres, selling to customers in smaller places using dedicated mobile phone lines. More than 130 lines were closed last week and almost £2 million of Class A drugs were seized.
Police searching for the missing fiancé of a murdered American blogger have found what appear to be human remains in a park in Florida. Agents said items belonging to Brian Laundrie, who is a person of interest in Gabby Petito's death, were also found during the search. Mr. Laundrie has been missing for more than a month after returning to Florida from a joint trip without his partner.
A new type of medicine called gene silencing is said to be used to treat a genetic disease which leaves people in crippling pain.
Acute intermittent porphyria can lead to paralysis and is sometimes fatal. It's hoped gene silencing can also lead to therapies for a range of untreatable diseases. Here's our health and science correspondent, James Gallagher.
We remember both how traumatic it was for both me going through it and for you guys as a family watching me go through it. It was that element for me of the total pain and the sickness and eventually the paralysis and the seizures.
Sisters Liz and Sue have lived in pain that few can imagine. They both have the genetic disease acute intermittent porphyria. Potent opioid painkillers were a feature of their daily life, and Liz was paralysed for 2 years.
One of the times that they had to transfer me from one hospital to another because I wasn't breathing very well at all and I needed intensive care, and Mum was following behind in her car, following the ambulance, and as soon as the blue lights went on, she just crumpled.
I lost it all. It fell overnight, lost my job, lost my company car, lost everything that I'd been working hard towards, and in a new relationship, not knowing whether my partner would stay with me. He did. We're married. We've got a little girl now, but yeah, it was scary.
Gene silencing therapies get to the root cause of Liz and Sue's genetic disease rather than just managing their pain. They were part of trials here at King's College Hospital, which showed the drug cut severe symptoms by 75%.
So to find a drug that really does transform people's lives is extraordinary, and the first time I've seen it really in my career as a doctor. If we can control genes and switch them off when we want to and switch them on when we want to, then almost anything is possible in terms of treating conditions, including Alzheimer's and cancer and everything else.
So you've been on the drug for a while now. What kind of difference is it making?
The difference is astronomical. We're not in pain anymore and not feeling sick and able to predict life, not having to kind of wait for attacks to happen, which means you're generally more dependable. You're not dependent on opiate-based pain relief, and that leads to things like being able to succeed in a job.
And Sue?
I think being so much stronger, not being in pain, being able to sleep, just being able to plan life a little bit, be able to be a mother better, to be able to be a wife better, and to just live life.
Liz and Sue are some of the first people to benefit from gene silencing medicines, but they won't be the last. James Gallagher, BBC News.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.